As customary, I'd like to thank everyone for posting their questions and making this video possible. Have you heard anything about what Anthony Senna is doing nowadays? I have not, but I would assume he's taking one day at a time, especially after completing the sentence that he did. I think most people are under the impression that guys come home and immediately start committing crimes. That's not the case. This next person wanted to know if there was ever any bugs or listening devices ever found in one of the social clubs or house. I responded by asking what social clubs and what house he was referring to. He replied in general. The answer is not during my time, and this is because technology had come such a long way. I believe the days of planting bugs are also long over. Did you know or meet Bronx guy Louis Cirillo in the streets or in Lewisburg? I've never met him and also was never in Lewisburg. Cirillo was known to be a major narcotic supplier, one involved in the French Connection. In 1972, the FBI dug up his garden and discovered over $1 million in buried money. What was your credit card business and how did you start it? It started in the late 80s after I was introduced to a midnight manager of a Manhattan post office. This person was able to get boxes of credit cards destined for banks. I made a deal with him to give him so much money per card, as well as other items that he requested besides money. The business didn't last long because I was wanted for a 1989 murder, so naturally, the credit card business was no longer a priority. I know you like good food. Have you ever eaten at Crispy Pizza in the Bronx? I've heard of Crispy Pizza, but never had it. It looks good from what I'm able to see, but I also couldn't find the Bronx location. In present day, all the pizzerias have stepped up their game, and you could basically go anywhere in any state and find very good pizza, which wasn't the case years ago. I know the building trades in most large cities, including my own, have always had some mob influence over different union locals. I believe your own family had influence over some of the painter locals when you were part of that life. Did you have any knowledge of the 5 families controlling Plumbers Local 1? You're correct. My former family was involved with the painting locals, as most building trades had mob influence or control. I believe years ago, the Plumbers Union was involved in a racketeering case. Essentially, where there's a union, you'll find a mob. Construction was, and always will be, a big moneymaker for the mob. Did you have contact with Tommy D'Ambrosio when you both were out of prison? I can say besides sending regards through Frankie Salerno, no. Thomas at the time was living in Florida and has since moved to another state. Which brings us to the next question. Can you make any comment around the recent rumors about Frank Salerno possibly having passed? I've heard these rumors, and I believe people are mistaking another Frank Salerno who died this past December 2024. That Frank Salerno happens to be 93 years old, which is not Skinny Frankie from East Harlem. More often than not, inaccurate and false information gets reported, which is basically the definition of the internet. If there was one thing you could say to Lorenzo Menino, what would it be and why? I would remind him that he's a class act. Why? Because he is. Were you familiar with Froggy Galleone, or was he in jail your whole time on the street? Jimmy Galleone was released in late 2015, but was on paper, parole, so the two of us never met. As most people know, he's the son of former Gambino associate Ralphie Galleone, who the Gambinos killed. Back in the days, when mob families had shooters, how did most of these guys get their handgun experience? This person was wondering if there was any kind of training. To start with, always keep in mind, any member of that life should be a shooter if need be. I don't know what experience people had, if any. When and if a person's needed to act, that task is usually up close and personal, so being a marksman is not necessary. This next person said, saw you in a photo with Gambino associate Kyle Johnson. Most find it unusual to see African Americans having close ties with mob crews. Was wondering if you had any stories about him or even African American associates in general. As I've mentioned, Kyle was a nice guy, very respectful. And I'm not going to say any more than that. It's also not unusual to see guys other than Italians as associates. Throughout mob history, there were plenty. If they were ever to make a movie featuring Gaspipe, who, in your opinion, would be a great actor to play the role? It would have to be someone who's capable of acting in a diabolical way, which, in my opinion, would be Javier Bardem. I believe he could pull the role off. Here's a comical question. Have you ever been expected to kiss a boss's ring? The answer is, I think some people can't differentiate TV shows and movies from reality. We weren't expected to kiss rings, only asses. Any mob guys you were around that had a sense of humor and maybe weren't so serious all the time. To be honest, not everyone was so serious, and a lot of guys had a sense of humor. In fact, just for the sake of sanity, in that life, you needed to have a sense of humor. Do you know why Lucchese family underboss, Andino Papadio, was killed outside his Lido Beach home in 1976? Law enforcement suspected associates of Carmine Galante were responsible. Why didn't Anthony Corallo immediately order Galante's execution? And why did it take over 3 years for the commission to decide to have Galante killed? I don't have any personal knowledge as to why Papadio, who was called Tony Noto, was killed. It took place on September 24, 1976, when Papadio spotted a suspicious car parked across the street from his Lido Beach house at 121 Eva Drive. It turns out the occupants of the car shot him to death after he walked over to it. I've read several articles where the finger pointed to Galante for having Papadio killed, but there's also one which specifically states Corallo lost control of his family to one Andino Papadio. He regained it last September by arranging with Galante's help for Papadio's murder. So who knows what the true story is behind that murder? I don't believe Galante's murder in 1979 had anything to do with Papadio's murder. If you haven't liked this video yet, please do, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. And if you'd like to show your appreciation for videos like this, or more importantly, help me continue making them, you can do that by donating with the Super Thanks icon down below or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. And for the final question, would like to know the process of how you research. What is the average time it takes to research each video and blog? I think it would be interesting to learn how much time and effort goes into each post. Okay. Years ago, 2 New York City department stores, Macy's and Gimbel's, were well-known rivals and major competitors. They were actually down the block from one another in Manhattan. As a result, the infamous idiom came about, does Macy's tell Gimbel's? Meaning competitors never share information, methods, or trade secrets with one another. With that said, what I can share is a great deal of time and effort goes into each and every video and blog. So much so that it interferes in my personal and love life as well. If I'm in research mode, I have at times 2 computers, my phone, and sometimes a tablet open at the same time, resulting in many pages of notes. But what I don't do is sit in front of a microphone and talk because I have a pair of lips.